Chioma was always a girl with a sad gaze and heavy shoulders, as if she carried the weight of the world on her back. At just 21 years old, her life seemed to have lost its shine since her mother, the only one who paid attention to her, passed away. Living in that big house full of silence and cold walls, the young woman felt like a ghost, invisible to her own father, Emeka. He, who once hugged her lovingly, now seemed to forget she existed. His eyes were always on Emanka, her half-sister, who was the center of attention and didn't need much to get what she wanted. From a young age, she had an aura of superiority, and it was no surprise that Emeka treated her like a true princess. But for Chioma, every affectionate gesture her father gave to her half-sister Emanka was like a stab in the heart. Poor Chioma grew up hearing Emanka's laughter echoing through the halls, while her father's steps rushed to meet any desire of the favored daughter. Chioma, on the other hand, could only watch from afar, trying to understand where she had gone wrong. Her room at the end of the hallway was a refuge, the only place where she could cry without being seen. There, she remembered the days when her mother was still alive, the moments when Emeka was a present father, and the warmth she felt in the home. But those days were gone like leaves in the wind. Now all that remained was a cold stepmother, Ngozi, who seemed annoyed by Chioma's presence, and a father who treated her like she was nothing more than a shadow. He never asked how she was, never cared about her problems. If she fell ill, it was as if nothing had happened. Everything always revolved around Emanka, who, with just a cold, would make the whole house spring into action to care for her. Ngozi, with her superior air and judgmental gaze, always reinforced that distance. Chioma knew her stepmother preferred her not to be there. In fact, she had overheard some whispered conversations on silent nights when Ngozi suggested it might be better if Chioma found somewhere else to stay, far away. But she had nowhere to go. All that remained was that cold house, where love seemed to have been buried along with her mother. The days passed slowly, and the routine in the house was always the same. Chioma would wake up early, prepare breakfast while Ngozi and Emanka slept late. When everyone gathered at the table, the young woman stayed silent, watching Emeka serve Emanka with a dedication he had never shown her. Ngozi blamed Chioma's mother for taking Emeka away from her life. In the past, the two had known each other, but Chioma's mother appeared, and with her sweetness and beauty, she won Emeka's heart, leaving Ngozi behind. Since then, she harbored a resentment that only grew over the years, and she unleashed it on Chioma, whom she saw as a constant reminder of her defeat. Even though they had servants at their disposal, Ngozi made sure the young woman was responsible for all the household chores. It was as if she wanted Chioma to suffer while she and her beloved daughter enjoyed their carefree days. Chioma spent hours cleaning, scrubbing floors, washing clothes, and cooking for everyone in the house without anyone offering her even a word of thanks. Her fingers were always sore from scrubbing, and her feet, tired from walking around the house, could barely bear the weight of her body. It was constant suffering, but the young woman never complained. She kept everything to herself, trying not to show how much it hurt her. For Ngozi, overburdening Chioma with work wasn't enough. No, she wanted to see her truly suffer. Many times, after a long day of exhausting chores, Chioma would come to the kitchen hungry and anxious to eat something, but Ngozi had it all planned out. She would shut the kitchen door in Chioma's face, telling her that there was nothing left for her. "Eat tomorrow," she would say with a malicious smile, knowing that the young woman had gone all day without eating. Ngozi took pleasure in watching her grow weak, observing how Chioma tried to hide the sound of her growling stomach. Chioma, with an empty stomach and eyes full of tears that she tried hard to hold back, would go up to her room where she would curl up on her bed, hugging herself in an attempt to calm the void that hunger and loneliness left. Many times she went entire days eating only what was left the next day, or something she managed to sneak when Ngozi wasn't around. The worst part was seeing her father so blind to all this. He didn't notice or didn't want to notice the suffering his daughter was going through. To him, Ngozi was a good wife, someone who took care of the house and Emanka with perfection. And to Emanka, her half-sister, Chioma was nothing more than a servant. They barely spoke, and when they did, It was with an arrogance that made Chioma feel even more insignificant. "You should thank my mother for not throwing you out," Amanka would say, reminding Chioma that the only reason she was still living in that house was because of her mother's generosity. Many times, Chioma thought about escaping and leaving everything behind, but where would she go? The world outside seemed so vast and unknown, and Chioma had no one she could trust. All she had left were dreams of a better life, a future where she wasn't treated like a shadow, where someone would finally see her and love her for who she was. Amanka was the younger sister, but as the days passed, her cruelty became more and more evident. She loved to show off her new clothes, expensive dresses and shoes that sparkled like jewels. With every new garment, Amanka paraded around the house as if she were on a runway, always stopping in front of Chioma. "Look, I got another dress from Dad. Isn't it beautiful? I don't think you'll ever wear something like this, right?" Amanka's voice always carried a venomous tone, filled with superiority, just like her mother's. Amanka seemed to feed off Chioma's suffering. The more she saw her sister downcast, the more amused she became. "You should dress up more. No wonder no one looks at you. Maybe one day Dad will give you something decent to wear. But don't count on it, he barely remembers you exist," she would say, smiling. But before continuing the story, give this video a like if you're enjoying the plot. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss any of the exciting upcoming stories. And leave me a comment down below, telling me what you think will happen to Chioma. Your opinion is very important. Months passed, and everyone continued their lives filled with ostentation and luxury, while Emeka's situation became unsustainable. His company, which had once been prosperous, was now on the verge of collapse. Debts were piling up, creditors were knocking at the door, and he no longer knew how to maintain control. Each day the desperation grew. Amanka and Ngozi had no idea how serious the situation was. They kept spending as if nothing was wrong, while Emeka could barely sleep, tormented by his worries. When all options seemed exhausted, he decided to do something he never imagined. Seek out Mr. Okoro, the richest and most influential man in the city. Everyone knew that Mr. Okoro was a powerful man, capable of turning any business into a success. His fortune was immeasurable, and his word carried weight in all social and economic circles. At the first meeting, Emeka was nervous, with sweaty hands and a racing heart. He knew that asking Mr. Okoro for help meant submitting to his conditions, and the man was not known for doing favors for free. Heart sank. He had expected there would be a condition, but the next words took him completely by surprise. "I have a son, Ifani. He's old enough to get married, but I want a good wife for him, someone from a respectable family. I've thought of one of your daughters. I'm sure she would be the perfect wife, and in return, I'll save your company." The words hit Emeka like a hammer to the head. Marry off one of his daughters? That wasn't something he had anticipated. He thought of Amanka and Chioma. Amanka, his younger and favorite daughter, had always been treated like a princess, while Chioma, forgotten by him, silently endured the weight of neglect. Amanka was certainly the obvious choice, but the idea of giving her away in marriage as part of a business deal made him uncomfortable. Emeka hesitated, trying to buy some time. "I need to think about this," he said, his voice trembling. Okoro just smiled, as if he knew Emeka had no other option. "Take all the time you want, but remember, time is not on your side. Your company won't last much longer, and I guarantee it will be impossible for you to recover without my help." With those words, Emeka left Okoro's office. In the days that followed, Emeka could barely look at his daughters. Soon he would have to decide which one would be sacrificed in this agreement. Amanka was the daughter he had always spoiled, and he knew it would be nearly impossible to convince her to accept an arranged marriage. She had always had everything she wanted, including the freedom to choose her own path. On the other hand, Chioma already lived on the fringes of that family, invisible to him and everyone in that house. Would he have the courage to push her into a life she hadn't chosen, as a bargaining chip? What do you think? But before continuing, I noticed you still haven't liked the video, so check that, And make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any new stories, okay? Let's continue. Part of Emika thought it would be less painful to choose the rejected daughter. But another part knew that it would be unfair. A final blow of cruelty to a daughter who had never known a father's true love. While these doubts consumed him, Ngozi and Amanka remained oblivious to the chaos unfolding. Amanka paraded around the house in her new dresses, and Ngozi made plans for the upcoming parties and high society events. For them, life remained perfect. But Emika, tormented by the pressure to save his legacy, knew that the moment to make a decision was drawing nearer, and no matter who he chose, the consequences would be devastating. After much thought, he finally made the decision without hesitation. Chioma was the perfect solution to the problem he himself had created. If Amanka was his princess, the daughter he so loved and cared for, Chioma was just a responsibility, someone he could easily sacrifice in the name of his success. It was Chioma's birthday. The afternoon was fading when Emika called her to his office. While tidying up the room, one of the house employees informed her of the news. Chioma, who rarely spoke to her father, was happy to know that he had remembered her on that day. As for the past 10 years, since her mother's passing, she had never heard a happy birthday from his lips. Chioma ran to the office, excited, imagining receiving a smile and a hug from her father, unaware of the terrible news that awaited her. Upon opening the office door, she found Emika more serious than usual. Her heart immediately grew heavy, anticipating what was about to happen. Surely it wouldn't be good, but nothing could have prepared her for the words that came out of her father's mouth at that moment. "You're going to get married." Chioma was in shock, her eyes filling with tears before she could even process what was happening. "Marry? What do you mean, father? I don't understand. I don't have any suitors," Chioma said, still sobbing. Her father, in a rough voice and without any remorse, declared, "From now on, you are engaged to Afani, the son of Mr. Okoro. He is a good young man, and this will save our family," Emika said in a cold and definitive tone, as if he were talking about a simple transaction. Chioma couldn't stop crying. "Please, don't do this to me," she begged, her voice trembling and choked with despair. "I want to marry for love. I deserve that. I can't marry someone I don't even know. I don't want this life." But Emika, without even looking her in the eyes, remained impassive. "Chioma, our family is in a difficult situation. I have no other choice. You will do it, period. Or, you can leave this house and never return." That threat was devastating. She had nowhere to go. She had no one else in the world but her father. Being cast out would mean a life of misery, without any support, without a home, without a future. "Dad, please." Chioma tried once more, but her words seemed to hit a wall. Emika had already made his decision, and nothing she said would change his mind. "This is not a discussion, Chioma. I've already spoken with Mr. Okoro, and you're going to marry Afani." Chioma was being sold, like merchandise, to save her father's business, and that made her feel even more insignificant. Throughout her life, she had been ignored, pushed aside, and now, when she finally thought she might be seen, it was only as a means to an end. Right on her birthday, it felt like her father was handing her a death sentence. With no strength left to keep fighting, Chioma fell to her knees in front of her father. "I'm your daughter. How can you do this to me? Please, I beg you, I'll do anything else, but not this." He, showing no emotion, moved away from her as if her pain did not matter. "Get up, enough with the theatrics. This has already been decided. I won't say it again. Either you do as I say, or you leave this house today." She was cornered and had no other choice. All that remained was to accept the cruel fate imposed upon her. Finally, she stood up, with a trembling body and a shattered soul. "All right, father. I accept," she said in a weak, almost inaudible voice. But inside her, something broke forever. The hope she had clung to for so long finally vanished. She would be forced to marry Afani, a man she had never met, and she would live the rest of her life as a pawn in a game she never chose to play. In the days that followed, she could hardly look at herself in the mirror. The wedding was being arranged quickly, as if everything had been decided long before she was informed. Ngozi, who usually despised her, now feigned a false interest in helping her choose the dress, making cruel and mocking comments. "You should be happy. After all, how many girls in your situation would be lucky enough to marry a man as rich as Ifani? Think about how much your life will improve," she said with that venomous smile that made Chioma feel even more suffocated. But there was one more surprise that Chioma was unaware of. Ifani, in addition to being a complete stranger, had suffered an accident that left him confined to a wheelchair, turning him into a bitter and cruel man. With each passing day, the idea of her forced marriage consumed her like a dark shadow. Chioma had dreams of love, of freedom, but all of them were being crushed by her father's selfish decision. Chioma's marriage to Ifani was anything but a fairy tale. On the big day, while people laughed and celebrated, Chioma felt the weight of every step she took toward the altar, as if she were walking into her own prison. Seeing Ifani at the altar was even more painful. Knowing he was confined to a wheelchair, he awaited her there with a hard, empty look, without even a smile as she approached. Chioma knew that this man did not see her as a wife but as merchandise. She tried to hold back her tears, but inside, she was broken. Since the accident that left him in that chair, Ifani had become a shadow of what he used to be. His bitterness was evident in every gesture, in every word. He believed that Chioma was there only for interest, that she had sold herself for money, like so many other women he had seen approach his family. And with that belief, he treated her with a contempt that hurt more than any unspoken words. After the wedding, when they arrived at Ifani's house, a grand mansion surrounded by impeccable gardens, Chioma realized that although it was beautiful on the outside, the coldness of that house perfectly reflected the emptiness that now dominated her life. The silence was suffocating. There were no laughs, no life. Only long, empty hallways and the shadow of a broken man who cared for nothing but his own pain. Ifani rarely exchanged words with her, and when he did, they were always filled with resentment. "I know why you're here," he said once without even looking at her. "You only want my family's money. That's all you care about, isn't it? Don't think I don't see it." Ifani's words were like poison. Chioma wanted to scream, to tell him that she had never chosen to be there, that she was also a victim of the circumstances. But every time she tried to get close, Ifani pushed her away with his coldness. "Don't bother pretending, Chioma. I know women like you. Don't come to me with fake feelings." He was not only bound to the wheelchair, but also to a past that consumed him and prevented him from seeing beyond his own bitterness. They never consummated the marriage. They slept in separate beds, and Chioma tried to find a way out, but she saw no escape. Ifani always isolated himself in his office, where he spent hours staring out the window without saying a word. As the days passed, Chioma found herself wandering through the house's corridors, feeling more alone than ever. She, who had already been invisible in her own home, was now invisible to the man who should have been her companion. Although she had left her father's house, she had not escaped the suffering. On the contrary, now she felt even more alone. In her attempt to find some trace of humanity in her companion, she prepared his morning tea or helped him reach something out of his grasp, but he always rejected her help with a simple gesture or cold words. "I don't need your help," he said without even looking up. To him, Chioma was nothing more than someone forced to be there, and he refused to believe that she could want anything more than money. As if that weren't enough, it wasn't just Ifani who made Chioma's life unbearable in that house. The servants, who should have shown respect, treated her with disdain, as if she were an intruder. From the first day, she noticed the malicious glances and murmurs that arose whenever she walked through the halls. "She's only here for the money," some said. "She'll never be like the fiancé he once had," others murmured. Chioma heard it all, though she tried to ignore it. It was like reliving the worst days of her life in her father's house, where she had also been despised by those who should have loved her. There were moments when the servants treated her as if she were an employee and not the lady of the house. When she asked for something, the response came loaded with irony, and the service was done grudgingly. "Sure, Mrs. Chioma," they said, with a fake smile on their faces, but as soon as they turned away, she could hear the cruel whispers. It didn't matter what she did. No matter how much she tried to be kind or gentle, she was treated like a nuisance. And Ifani did nothing to defend her. In fact, he seemed indifferent to everything and didn't care. The heavy silence that reigned in the rooms was only interrupted by malicious murmurs and Ifani's bitter words. Days passed and nothing changed. Every day, she prepared his favorite dishes with care, hoping that maybe he would notice the gesture. "I made your favorite dish today," she said with a timid smile, placing the plate in front of him. However, Ifani rarely even looked at her. "I don't need this, Chioma. Don't pretend you care," he responded, pushing the plate aside or completely ignoring her attempts. The conversations she tried to start were brief and cold. "How was your day, Ifani? I saw something interesting in the garden today." She always tried anything to create a connection, but Ifani cut her off before she could continue with any topic. "I'm busy. I don't have time for useless conversations." Chioma would retreat silently, feeling the weight of rejection on her shoulders, but she didn't let that stop her in her attempts to move forward. She believed that, at some point, Ifani would realize that she wasn't pretending, that she genuinely wanted to build something with him, despite the circumstances. One day, however, something unexpected happened. Ifani was sitting in his office, as usual, immersed in his thoughts, when he heard muffled laughter coming from the hallway. Curious, he rolled his chair to the half-open door and saw two of the house's servants chatting animatedly. "Chioma thinks she can pass herself off as a good wife, but we all know she's only here for the money," said one of them, laughing. "Sure, she tries so hard, but in the end, she's just another gold digger," responded the other, with a sarcastic laugh. Ifani felt a pang of discomfort in his chest. For a moment, he wondered why that bothered him. After all, he also believed Chioma was there for the same reason. But hearing those words come from other people's mouths stirred something inside him. He stood there, reflecting, not fully understanding what he was feeling. For the first time, he began to wonder if maybe he was being unfair to that girl. After all, she had never asked him for anything. She never demanded money or status. She was there, day after day, trying to please him without ever complaining. That night, Ifani couldn't sleep. The servant's words swirled in his mind, and for the first time in a long while, he began to think about what he himself was doing. Could Chioma really be what he had imagined? Or was he so consumed by pain and resentment that he couldn't see beyond his own bitterness? He spent the night reflecting, remembering every attempt Chioma made to get close, every meal she carefully prepared, every conversation she tried to start, and how he had always rejected her. Ifani began to realize that perhaps Chioma wasn't the villain in this story. Maybe the evil was in him, in his inability to see beyond his own suffering. The next day, still troubled by his own thoughts, Ifani made a decision. For the first time, he decided to do something about the way Chioma was being treated. He gathered all the servants in the large hall of the house. Chioma, who was in the kitchen, heard the hurried footsteps and murmurs and went to see what was happening. She was surprised to see Ifani in the center of the room, with all the employees around him. With a firm voice and a serious expression, Ifani began to speak. "From today on, Chioma will be treated with the respect she deserves. She is my wife, and I will not tolerate any more murmurs or disrespect in this house. Anyone caught speaking ill of her or treating her with disdain will be immediately dismissed." Ifani's words left the servants silent and astonished. Chioma, who was used to being ignored and despised by everyone, could not believe what she was hearing. For the first time, Ifani was defending her and treating her as someone important. The servants looked at her with respect, though there was still a certain surprise on their faces. After this drastic change from Ifani, one afternoon, after the incident with the servants, Chioma was sitting in the garden, watching the flowers sway in the gentle breeze. Ifani, in his wheelchair, slowly approached, and the silence between them was only broken by the sound of the leaves. "Chioma, I need to apologize to you," he said in a deep but sincere voice. She looked at him, surprised, but said nothing, letting him continue. I've been cold to you. From the beginning, I judged you without even knowing you. I thought you were like all the others, but I was wrong. I see you are different. You are a good person. I'm sorry for everything. I hope that one day you can forgive me for all the suffering I caused you. Those words resonated deeply with Chioma. Hearing that from Ifani, who had always rejected her, was unexpected. She felt a mix of relief and emotion, but also doubt. Could she trust that this change was real? However, the remorse in Ifani's eyes seemed genuine. Thank you, Ifani. I also have to tell you that I was never here for the money. I never wanted this marriage, but I had no other choice. I just wanted a little peace, a little respect. The words came out with difficulty, but they were spoken with sincerity. For the first time, they looked at each other differently, no longer as strangers forced to share the same life, but as two people who were finally willing to get to know each other. From that day on, things began to change slowly between them. Ifani started talking more, showing interest in her stories, in who she was behind the mask of a wife he had once rejected. For the first time, Ifani opened up about his accident, about how he had been an active man full of dreams. But after the accident that left him in a wheelchair, he felt like everything of value had been taken from him. I lost more than the movement of my legs. I lost who I was. After that day, I became a shadow, distancing myself from everything and everyone. I thought no one would love or respect me for who I am anymore. His words carried a weight that he had never shared with anyone before. I understand what it's like to feel alone, she said, her voice soft but full of empathy. When my mother died, my father forgot about me. I became a stranger in my own home. I was surrounded by people, but I felt invisible. No one saw me, no one cared. Even today, I carry that pain with me. Ifani looked at her intently, seeing the sadness in Chioma's eyes. He had no idea that she had also carried so much suffering. Those honest conversations, those shared stories of their pains, slowly began to build a bridge between them. Ifani now looked at Chioma differently. Slowly, Chioma also began to feel something different. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't like in fairy tales, but slowly they began to fall in love. The road was still long, and the love that was growing between them was just beginning to show. But for the first time, Chioma felt that there was a chance to be happy, to have something real. And Ifani, despite all the fear that still surrounded him, began to open his heart, allowing her in. One day, while they were talking in the dining room, Mr. Okoro arrived with the air of someone who always has everything under control, with a more relaxed expression than usual. He said, Ifani, I spoke with a renowned doctor, a specialist who believes you can walk again. He has treated cases like yours before. It will be difficult, maybe painful, but there is a chance, he said, placing his hands on Ifani's shoulders, like someone giving a push toward destiny. Ifani remained silent for a long time. The idea of walking again was something he had buried deep, along with his dreams of a normal life. After so much time trapped in that wheelchair, his mind had closed to any possibility of healing. He had already given up trying, given up fighting. But now, with Chioma by his side, something different was bubbling inside him. She took his hand, as she had often done in recent months, and with a look full of courage, she said, I believe in you. No matter how hard it is, I'll be here. We'll face it together. It was Chioma's faith in him that pushed Ifani to make the decision that would change his life forever. The surgery was scheduled, and in the days leading up to the procedure, fear and anxiety mixed with a hint of hope. On the morning of the surgery, while they waited in the hospital's waiting room, Chioma held Ifani's hand firmly. You'll get through this, and when that happens, we'll build the life we always deserved. The surgery was long, hours of anguish for Chioma and Mr. Okoro, who anxiously waited at the hospital. When the doctor finally came out of the operating room, with a slight smile on his face, a wave of relief flooded the waiting room. It was a success, the doctor said. Now the hardest part begins, recovery and physical therapy, but Ifani has a great chance of walking again. Chioma felt tears running down her face. The hope she had kept deep in her heart was finally starting to take shape. The following months were full of challenges and breakthroughs. Ifani began an intense physical therapy routine, with painful and exhausting sessions. The effort seemed unbearable. But Chioma was always by his side, encouraging him, supporting him with every small step of progress. "I'm here, Ifani. One step at a time," she whispered, holding his hand in the hardest moments. And little by little the magic began to happen. Ifani's body started to respond, first with small movements, then with timid, unsteady steps. In time, Ifani began to walk again. He, who had felt imprisoned by his own body for so long, was now freeing himself, step by step. The love and support of Chioma were crucial to that journey, and Ifani knew it. Every time he managed to stand or take another step, he looked at her, and their eyes met in a silent exchange of gratitude and love. And as Ifani advanced in his recovery, their relationship blossomed even more. Ifani spoke of the places he wanted to take Chioma, of the dreams they could fulfill. They laughed together, made plans, and little by little, that house that had once been cold and silent filled with life. There was no longer room for the darkness and emptiness that had once consumed them. When Ifani finally managed to walk unaided for the first time, it was a moment that would remain etched in both of their memories forever. From that day on, the two began to build a truly happy life. They became not just husband and wife, but true companions, soulmates. While happiness and peace finally took over Chioma and Ifani's lives, Emeka's world was falling apart. His company, which was once thriving, now stood on the brink of ruin. Emeka had tried everything to save what little remained of his empire. He rushed around, pleading for favors, renegotiating contracts, but nothing worked. Every wrong decision from the past now came back to haunt him, and the weight of his poor choices dragged him down further and further. Desperate, with his company on the verge of bankruptcy, Emeka made a decision he never thought he would have to make. He went to seek out Mr. Okoro, the man who had once extended a hand by arranging the marriage between Chioma and Ifani, hoping that he could help him once more. When he entered Okoro's luxurious office, he already knew that his position was one of complete desperation. His hands trembled, and his face showed the weight of the humiliation he was about to face. But this time, Okoro was not willing to offer his help. "Emeka, I've done what I could for you. I gave you the chance to save your company through Chioma and Ifani's marriage. Now there's nothing more I can do. You made your choices," he said in a cold, cutting voice. Emeka's expression, a mixture of frustration and shame, made it clear. He knew this was the end. He left Okoro's office with slumped shoulders, defeated. The businesses that had been his life for so long were lost. There were no more options, no more exits. The collapse of his company and his family was even more devastating. After his company declared bankruptcy and the debts became unbearable, Emeka, Ngozi, and Amanka were evicted from their luxurious home. With nowhere to go, they moved into a small, dilapidated house in the suburbs, where life became a daily struggle for survival. Ngozi, who had once reigned as the arrogant and haughty wife, fell gravely ill shortly after the move. Without resources for proper treatment, her health quickly deteriorated. Amanka, accustomed to being served and pampered, found herself lost and unable to care for her mother, facing the harsh reality of a miserable life. Without practical skills or sufficient education to find decent work, Amanka was forced to work in degrading conditions just to obtain the basics for survival. Meanwhile, Emeka, consumed by guilt and shame for sacrificing Chioma in a deal that didn't save his fortune, began to sink into a deep depression. Unable to cope with the weight of the consequences of his actions, he became a recluse, emotionally abandoning his family. Without hope or the strength to continue, Emeka succumbed to despair, and in a final act of hopelessness, decided to end his life, leaving Ngozi and Amanka completely alone. Amanka, now without a father and with a mother on the brink of death, was forced to care for Ngozi on her own, watching her suffer in her final days, fragile and bedridden. Without money to buy medicine or food, Amanka was consumed by guilt, regretting all the cruelty she had shown in the past. She understood too late that her life of privilege and arrogance had not prepared her to face the real world. When Ngozi finally passed away, Amanka was left completely alone, without friends, without family, and without hope. With her mother's death, Amanka was adrift, wandering aimlessly through the streets, with no one to help her. She became a shadow of the person she once was, constantly remembering the days when everything was easy, and she had the world at her feet. Now, however, she lived in misery, invisible to the rest of society, just as Chioma had been to her at one time. Fate ensured that she paid cruelly for the disdain and selfishness that had always filled her heart. The life lesson of this story is found in Galatians 6 verse 7. A man reaps what he sows. Emeka, Ngozi, and Amanka sowed selfishness, contempt, and cruelty, and in the end, they reaped pain, misery, and loneliness. On the other hand, Chioma, despite being ignored and mistreated, remained kind and patient, and was rewarded with love and respect. The message is clear. What we sow in our lives, whether good or bad, is what we will reap in the future. Chioma and Afani, after all the challenges, found the true meaning of love and happiness. Their story, filled with pain and overcoming, became a reminder that love can bloom in the darkest places, and that even in the midst of the greatest difficulties, hope and love can triumph.